So we got a few things to talk about, mostly just in relation to stories that we obviously talked about last week. I mean, we'll start off by quickly updating the story from last week, where I may or may not have gotten a little heated when we talked about the potential of an in-game advertisement system that was going to be adopted in console gaming. Specifically, Tencent and EA were listed in this. Now, EA has come out since and has said, you know, they're not going to do that. I mean, this is verbatim the line that they gave in response. Following incorrect reports suggesting that we are looking into, I'm going to try this again. Reading is very difficult for me. Following incorrect reports suggesting that we are looking to introduce TV-style commercials into our games, we wanted to clarify that in-game advertising for console games is not something we're currently looking at or have signed any agreements to implement, an EA spokesperson said. Creating the best possible player experience remains our priority focus. Now, you'll remember that I said at the very end of that show last week that even if, this is something that was going to be done very sporadically by just a few people, it's going to happen. This is an inevitability. So EA may be claiming right at this very moment that they are not going to implement something like this into games, which for those who didn't listen to last week's episode, maybe you're coming across the show. Thank you so much for checking us out, by the way. I say us as, like there's some person next to me here that, totally doesn't exist. But thanks for checking the podcast out nonetheless. Essentially, there was this technology that seems to be patented where it was going to be giving the offer to players to be able to watch in-game ads on console specifically in order to get things like, currency. Like you see it on mobile games all the time. You'll be playing your gacha game, like if you're a waifu hunter or an anime lover like I am, and you'll get the, if you watch this video, we'll give you 15 coins, and that can go towards maybe, unlocking the next waifu that you'll be able to parade around and have, infinite dreams about, and totally nothing creepy. No, we're nothing creepy. But yeah, it was something that's already been around in mobile games, and it seems like the technology has been patented to do so in console games. And I immediately get my guard up about that because most mobile games that implement these kind of, what's the word I'd like to use for it? Traps, I think would be the word that I like to use. Is that mobile games don't charge you anything usually to play their games. You have to pay for currency or pay for packs or whatever else and things of that nature. Whereas on a console game, and specifically one of the games that we all assume would get something like this would be, your Maddens, your FIFAs, your NBAs, your NHLs, basically your EA Sports games, not to mention 2K with obviously NBA being the big cash cow that they're running. You assume that that's going to be the case there because that's the de facto game when it comes to really, really horrendous and downright dangerous predatory mechanics that these games try to offer in order to get you to spend more money on them. Even though you've already spent your 60, 70, 80, sometimes $100+ on these games, they still want to try to take as much out of you as they can. And EA may try to claim that they have not been looking at it or have signed any agreements to it. Does not mean anything. And keep in mind, too, that they only said console games, which is something that a lot of people are reading into quite a bit as well, because they didn't say PC, which means there's still an opening, which means mobile games are still an opening. I mean, they already exist in most mobile games anyway. But I do not believe for a second that this statement means anything apart from a PR reaction to a story that got kind of leaked out into the aether. Because EA honestly has not shown us any sort of, restraint. I almost said resentment. I'm like, they hate their customers if they're not paying for them. That's about the most resentment you'll get out of EA. But they have not been one to show a lot of restraint. And it continues to be that way, and more companies have followed suit since because they know that they can get away with it. And my worry would be that something like this would continue, and something like this would absolutely happen. Because why wouldn't they? Of course they would. It's more money in their pockets. Have you seen the kind of money that these higher-ups at EA make? You think they don't want more? I know that we all sit here, I'm making next to nothing. And I'm sitting here being like, man, if I got $1 million in my bank account, I don't know what the hell I do with it. These guys are sitting there with tens of millions, hundreds of millions, even billions, some of these people. And they're going, which cruise am I going to select this week? Like, they don't care. It's just money in their bank account. They just want more. It's pure greed, simple, plain as can be. And I don't believe for a second that that's true, that they say that they may have not signed anything. I am calling bullshit that it's not something they're currently looking at. Maybe they're not currently looking at it, but believe me, they have salivated at the idea of finding more ways to get more money in their pockets, whether it being through advertisers or, just sucking more money out of the cash cow that is their customers. So I don't believe for a second that that's the case. I think they are looking into something like this. Maybe not this very moment, but they are, because they're always trying to find a way to make another buck. That's how I kind of see the issue. I mean, you guys are welcome to, comment on the YouTube video, or if you have any way of, I don't remember how every service is for podcasting in terms of audio, if they allow you to comment at all. But if you can't comment, whether it's through the YouTube comments or say Twitter, Instagram, or Gmail account, which is pixelplaypodcast@gmail.com, obviously, let us know what you think about that. But I quite frankly do not believe for a second that this is something that EA would not just love to be able to do. They're probably, if anything, they saw this article and went, that's a really good idea. And now that they've seen how people reacted to it, maybe they just aren't going to do it now because they see the backlash. Which, some people will say, well, how do they not know people are going to backlash about it? They have been trying stuff forever. And sometimes we catch it, sometimes we don't. Sometimes actually, probably more often than not, we always catch it. It's just sometimes we don't make a big enough of a fuss. Not every game is Star Wars Battlefront 2. It doesn't always go that way because FIFA, Madden, they all exist still. They all exist with the absolutely horrendously predatory microtransactions that they run in those games. But not every game has that. Not every game has that level of ignorance. Sometimes they just fall through the cracks, and sometimes they became these massive stories, and that's what Battlefront 2 was. But it isn't always going to be that way, and we have to keep that in mind.